Okay. Check out the slideshow. Now I'm going to erase this hide the meeting controls. Okay, just so that it's a little cleaner. Hey, Bruce. Hi, I thought you and Donna said you. Oh, next week.
And we'll have Paris just right here to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this way, yeah, this way it's getting saved. Don't try to. Yeah, Bruce. Gonna take that away.
This one was saved as the December meeting, hold on, a new one, so the first copy is next time.
Oh, on the thing you sent? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I know how to do that on the newsletter, so I'm gonna try it.
No, but on this too.
Oh, I put January.
I know you put January here, but you have
Oh.
to save the file as
Oh, I didn't even
January.
could save the file.
Yes, so I'll
Okay, yeah,
tell you,
you'll have to show
file
me that.
save as.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you just changed things and it was magic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dale.
Hey, pretty good time.
Yeah,
Maybe-
one of my neighbors did come, who was on the film, so then my other neighbor promised she'd come, so I've got two neighbors here.
Good.
Yeah, so it's nice.
So even though I have my sister in Rossmoor, she started renting in place.
Oh, she did.
2 days. Yeah,
And that'll take.
it's only for a month.
Oh,
So
I think she'll love it so much, she'll stay.
I don't know, but that's amazing. We had a fun day yesterday. Plus, Michael's and just
Oh,
sort of hung out
Yeah.
together.
that's
And
nice.
yeah, we're both trying to stay away from my dad. Naps in the shower, you know,
Yeah.
just gonna have to suffer the else.
Those are just people now.
Those-
Deal with them.
He's gonna deal with them, you know.
I'm glad you had nice.
Don't want- Yeah, don't wanna go back to where we were.
Oh.
So, yeah, but they're super, super nice. This is a group that, another friend was having taken care of her mom.
Mhm.
They seem super nice, and at night there's a guy from 7 to 9 p.m. who's rather interesting, worked as on an oil rig.
Oh,
So we don't like oil rigs particularly.
but he's not doing that.
But I'm not doing that anymore. So he's quite he's, quite an interest. He runs a prison in the Philippines and
Seems like a lot of the home helpers are from the Philippines.
yeah.
You know, a friend of mine, her aunt was living in Rossmoor, like started to get Alzheimer's or dementia or something. She had people coming in to help her, and I think they're from the Philippines.
Yeah, I think everyone that works for this company of 70 people is from the Philippines.
Yeah. You have new faces tonight.
Yeah, maybe those
A
folks.
lot of new faces. Or rarely seen faces.
Well, maybe call helps a little.
Yeah, except I didn't call anybody except I did talk to my neighbors.
Well, that's good.
So.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well,
very
we
nice.
called it yesterday and
Uh,
this morning, but
yeah.
at least it's a reminder. I
Yeah.
know people said they weren't gonna come. They said they didn't call.
Yeah.
They didn't seem like annoyed or
No.
perturbed or anything.
Well, I wonder if people called my neighbors. Because when I saw, I'm out there, they're like, I might come tonight. Maybe you called them.
What the last names begin with?
Well, I've got Ula Davis, Sarah,
Uh-huh.
and Rose Holmes, who said she just decided she couldn't make it.
I was supposed to say G's.
Jeez.
I was like,
Then
G's.
one neighbor who came last month that I didn't even know was coming was Marilyn Borchardt, and she's coming again tonight. She signed up as a member last month when she came, so. She used to work for Food First. Remember Frances Moore Lapay,
Yes,
who started Food First?
yes.
Well, Marilyn used to be the development director. She was the one
Okay.
raising money for Food First all those years. So,
Uh-huh.
I was kind of fangirling as soon as she moved into the neighborhood. So Bruce told me that a new member he had talked to, has not been opening my emails with the newsletter because it didn't say it was from Sustainable Rossmoor, it just had my name on. So I went in and changed it. So from now on, they should say Sustainable Rossmoor in case people aren't opening them because they're from me. It's like, I had no idea.
Okay.
So,
Is that in the basics function?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, okay,
So now I changed it and we'll see if that makes more people.
that's
Excuse
interesting.
me.
Excuse me?
Yeah, because I mean, it always seems like it's got people's names on the emails that go out.
Exactly, because I've never changed mine to a generic.
Right, which is how the thing I
Yes.
sent ended up with your name.
Yeah,
So I guess I'll send you
it's always hard to remember all those little
things that you gotta do.
things. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is good attendance too.
I know.
Now we were watching the news with those horrible fires down at.
Yeah, that's what they were talking about
Oh my
back there.
God,
Really bad, huh?
100-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, you just really don't stand a chance
No,
against that.
terrible.
Yeah, and then Texas, it's really cold. Oh, and Pete was that's my son, starting a new job yesterday with the first day of the polar vortex in DC.
Oh,
So,
yikes.
yikes, yikes. This looks like a
She
comic.
doesn't look old enough.
No,
Oh, she must be the one that.
yeah.
But I don't know why I keep wanting to call him Paul. I know his name is Alex. I have to stop that.
Well, I think people is one of
So one fun thing we did over the holidays, we went to Bancroft Gardens in the evening
Oh, you did.
and it's all lit up. It was really neat.
I've heard it's really beautiful. I always wonder how cold it's gonna be.
Well, the night we went, it rained. We
Oh,
were okay for 45 minutes before it started to rain. It wasn't a cold rain though. But it was all of these laser lights, all the
Yeah.
succulents, and it
yeah.
was really, really, fun.
One of these years, I want to do that.
Yeah, no, we enjoyed that. Jenny's relatives, they rented a place out in Concord in Airbnb, so they were sort of way out there anyway.
Yeah.
And we just did very simple things. Like did puzzles and games. And
Yeah.
very little sightseeing. Very local.
Yeah. Yeah, we had our trip, but then besides that, the only other thing that we really did was Lawrence Hall of Science.
Oh, that's neat.
The older grandkid loves it there and
Yeah.
grandkid could run around and
Yeah,
it would be fine. So we did do that.
okay.
But
That was all I'm
stuff
running
to do
up
with
to.
it, Maria.
There is Little Farm. Where else did we used to take? Oh, the little train up in Tilden.
Oh, yeah, we didn't go to Tilden one of these years when they all had to do that.
And your son's good?
Yeah, it's good. He seems to be completely healed from his cancer, so he'll have to go back for CT scans periodically just to make sure, but it seems fine. So, yeah, kind of a bad year for us. But,
It's a terrible year for your
Yeah.
family.
yeah, but muddling through. Got a repair cafe coming up on the 25th.
Yes, yeah, I saw that. I put it on my calendar. So,
Yeah, so that'll be good. Gonna have 3 bike repair coaches, so I told Brandy to tell the committee members.
happy
Hi, happy new year.
hair. Right. How are you?
Good to see you. We just got.
It just got goosebumps. Oh,
When did that happen?
I got it for Christmas. July the 6th, the baby is due.
Oh, it's in hiding.
It's in hiding. It's under development.
Tammy, I give you.
Yes.
You're so amazing.
Happy New Year to you.
We get to have that fun job again this year. Not again, but.
Yeah, I'm following in the great footsteps of their symbols. See, I've already messed up the name of the speaker, so I'm not off on a good start. I got it.
No, goodness.
Well, and I know.
I got it.
Were you out walking with two little kids?
I was.
I saw you.
Today?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's bizarre that I recognize people just from the lane.
Yeah,
How they walk or how they.
yeah.
Oh.
Well, I had my 7-year-old grandson walking and the 2-year-old with a stroller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They look so sweet.
They are. They're very sweet. Yeah, so it's been nice having them here. They got here on December 21st and they're leaving at 7. Well, the flight is at 7 in the morning on Saturday. So,
Are they staying with you?
yeah,
Oh, sweet. Kind of. You're probably really tired.
I'm really tired. I'm really tired, but you know, totally worth it.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Good. Anyway, I'll let you continue to chat.
Oh,
See you in a minute.
Thank you.
Start.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It always feels good once we really get it started. It always feels good when it's over.
Yeah, that's a better. Yeah.
It's always a touch and go in the beginning, like. Barry knows how to do so many things that I don't know how to do.
Yeah, I have no idea how this works. And I'm gonna have to start learning how to run Zoom meetings, which I've never done. But, you know, it's not just the steering committee, but I'm now the chair of the Democrats of Rossmoor Issues Committee,
Yeah.
and that's all on Zoom. Mary Taylor has been doing it using her own Zoom account.
Okay.
So she would still do that, but I feel like I should get a Zoom account and learn how to do this stuff. So I'm hoping to have my son and daughter-in-law teach me that before they leave.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen how I'm not too good at it. I never know. Is there a host need? I'm used to for work situation, the host sets it up and then you admit the people.
Yeah,
But we seem to somehow have it set up that
naturally go in.
there doesn't need to be a host.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have to learn that stuff because I haven't done it. And it's important to know. I mean, that's how so much is done. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have a Zoom meeting with repair coaches next week, but Laura Warely is gonna deal with the Zoom portion of it. So at least I don't have to do that, but.
So how many are you expecting for that?
Well, I don't know how many will attend the coaches meeting, but I think we've got 25 or 26 coaches at least.
Great.
Yeah, and I told Randy, we've got 3 bicycle ones, and I want to have business, so tell all your members. So he says he got 5 responses back about that, so.
Well, today I took apart a frame piece of art that my parents had and used that frame in the same matting for something else I wanted to put in. Ripping off things and there are little nails and I just put it together with masking tape on the side,
I
but
bet it felt like an accomplishment. Yeah,
I'd actually bought a new frame at Michael's. Now I can return it. Turned out it was too small,
oh,
the interior.
yeah,
Even though it said 16 by 20,
yeah,
that was maybe the outside. So anyway, I was very proud of myself. Reusing something.
yeah, I'll bet. Well, you never know how many people will be bringing different things, so you don't know what repair coaches you're gonna have a need to. Last, you know, we had 2 with sewing machines last time, 2 repair coaches with sewing machines at the Rossmoor one.
Oh, to sew things.
But
Okay.
one of them can't come because she's got a lot going on in her personal life. The other one died just suddenly because I'm sending out all these notices and her daughter or somebody writes and says, Fran Love died suddenly and take her to your list. And it's like, oh, I guess that's the problem with being at Rossmoor, but you know. So we're getting repair coaches from other places too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Walnut Creek. It's not only Rossmoor.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true at Waterford. There's a turnout there.
Yeah.
Some
A couple more minutes and then.
That's fine.
Somebody got Jane on my wine glass with.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll think, all right, I'll be here.
Waiting another couple of minutes.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you for doing the hard part. This is really the key. So all I have to do is say what's on the slide and move on. So you're doing the hard part.
Body contribute together, so.
Yeah.
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 But
Okay. Start just in a couple minutes.
so we have the.
Oh, no, Carol did it this time. All that was from Carol Weed. Yeah, we're trying to get other people involved in the snack bringing. So Carol did all that. And her friend, she brought a friend to help her put it together. We're going to be starting in a few minutes, so if you could get your food and take your seats, that would be great. Can I be heard on that? Was I broadcasting?
Really.
Gotta be.
Huh?
Good.
Okay, we're getting ready to start. Grab your food, grab your drinks, and grab a seat. Okay.
Right, this is Caroline.
We're gonna start. If everybody can take a seat. Thank you. Hello, I'm Pam Chorizo. I'm the new president of Sustainable Rossmoor for this year, following in the very competent footsteps of Amanda Casey. Thank you, Amanda, for your service. So I'd like to welcome everybody who's here tonight. I see all kinds of new faces, which makes me very happy. So we hope you'll enjoy the meeting and continue to come, and thanks to the members who always come. We're going to start off with financial reports and membership reports. So Amanda, if you could handle the finances, thank you.
Thank you. This financial report was prepared by our previous treasurer, Adrian Byram, and I'll be taking over January 1st. So these are the results for December. We have membership revenues of 580, so I think that means 29 new members.
Yeah.
And expenses only of 118, and we have $7,000 remaining in the bank.
Adrian also prepared the membership report, and it says that we have 182 current members as of January 3rd, which is great. I don't recall it being that large before, so I'm pretty happy about that. 131 have been members since 2023 or earlier, and 51 joined in 2024 and have renewed. So thanks to everyone who's renewed their membership. If you haven't, this is how you do it. You can either do it online with a credit card. There's the links, or you can leave a $20 check in the Sustainable Rossmoor box at Gateway. I will just say that doing it by credit card is pretty easy, so go ahead and do that if you can. And we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to listen to our featured presentation, and then we'll do committee reports afterwards. So Margot, would you like to come up and introduce our featured speaker?
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Alex Bedig. Alex is an environmental water resources engineer based in Boston. He is the co-founder and chief innovation officer at OptiRTC, which is the world leader in a new approach to stormwater management called CMAC, or Continuous Monitoring and Adaptive Control. Alex has invited his Oakland-based colleague, Lainey Nelson, who is a senior engineer at Opti, to help with the case presentations and give a more West Coast relevance to their work. So Alex and Lainey will be talking about how this technology helps communities protect their watersheds and the people who live in them. And as you will see from the case histories, this is a tool that can help communities adapt to the changing world that may perhaps have more extreme weather patterns. Welcome, Alex and Lainey.
Share.
Oh, it's you share?
Right. Okay. So we're doing this so that we can record Alex along with his presentation. There you go. Okay. Thank you, Margot, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited about our conversation, and if you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate. We can pause and address them. If they get to be the point where it seems like we should take it offline and have a conversation after, we can do that as well. This doesn't need to be a lecture. I'm excited to get to speak to all of you and be joined by Lainey as well. So quickly, let's see if I can get this slide to switch. There we go. We've seen the introductions. My name is Alex Bedig, and I'm joined by Lainey Nelson. Between the two of us, we have both science and engineering degrees, and we work together on helping communities across the country adapt to the changing world that we all live in. This is a brief summary of the history of our company. We started the research on what we are doing in 2010, and we've been deployed across 37 states to date. So this is a very new approach, but it's also not completely fly by night. We've been around and we're continuing to grow, and we're excited about the future because we see the challenges, the mega trends that we're all facing in our communities continue to put need towards what we are doing. So briefly, before I get into those mega trends, I wanted to welcome you all, myself maybe, to Walnut Creek. One of the interesting pieces of Walnut Creek is that it was built a long time ago. Well, not so long ago, but in 1937 on the left, which is that photo on the left, you can see that it looked a lot different than it does today. And it was really in the post-World War II era when most of the hardscape was put down and many of the homes that you see on the map up there were built. So something to keep in mind is that much like many places around the world and our country, Walnut Creek was built with certain objectives and a certain scale in mind, and we're all still living in it. And that's really at the essence of the challenge that we have, that we face today. I mentioned these megatrends, and I think that's where I want to begin. One of the differences between the 1950s, when Walnut Creek was built, and the world that we live in today is that there's a very clear difference in the number of days with extreme rainfall events. Extreme is a bit of a term of art there. It's much more than is typical for that place. This data is from NOAA, and it looks across the country. You can ask the question, why is that? But really, that's a conversation for scientists.
as engineers, we are faced with this reality, and as community members, we all live in it. And so one of the challenges we have to do is deal with it. And when we think about why extreme single-day precipitation or rainfall events matter, we think about, well, typically when it rains, the runoff and all the water that comes from it tends to drain out within a few hours or a few days from that event. The place will recover. So if you have the same amount of rain in fewer days per year, then each one of those days with rain is going to cause more load on your system. So the things that your system was designed for may no longer be what you're experiencing. There's also a long-term trend, and this is a report card that was put up by American Society of Civil Engineering that essentially states that the stormwater infrastructure in our country is not keeping up with demand. And I understand how, I work in stormwater. It might sound like I'm complaining, but I think there are some really interesting reasons for this. And I think it's worth understanding those reasons because we're all trying to solve these problems. First of all, there have not been dedicated funding sources or many dedicated funding sources set aside for stormwater management, which means that whenever somebody is looking to, at a community level or a watershed scale basin, improve their stormwater management, they're competing with other projects and other initiatives within that community, which can slow down and make the long-term investment strategy more opaque. There's also complicated governance. We call them transboundary issues in the industry, but really what that means is the watersheds do not care where your town lines are. There are 2 countries in the world actually where they have gotten this right. I'll give you the answer. The Netherlands and New Zealand both have the same jurisdictions as they have watersheds. The name for mayor in Dutch is the same as watermaster as it translates. So you can understand how they've been thinking about this problem differently for a long time. But in the United States, we tend to have a patchwork of flood control districts, communities, and other bodies that tend to care about how the water moves through their system. And they may point fingers at each other when something isn't going right instead of collaborating on these solutions. And that also hurts our ability to invest long-term. As I mentioned, Walnut Creek is fairly new, but not that new. And so we have aging assets, and that's true across the country. And one of the realities of aging assets is that there's less known about them. Oftentimes when you start digging around an older system, you'll find pipes that were not on plans, or the actual dimensions of the system were not updated when the system was built, what they call the as-builts. So the engineers who are trying to figure out what the opportunity to act here is don't really have a clear picture. And that stymies the appetite for investment as well. And then the fundamental truth is we live in communities that have built out, whether it's an old town that's now the most central economic district in the city, or a suburb that has become fairly pricey because populations have continued to grow. Buying land and displacing homeowners is often not a favorable strategy with the community members. And so water managers are sensitive to the fact that they may lose support if they make too much of a ruckus while they're trying to fix the stormwater management problem. And so that also can have a feedback loop that stymies that investment. The last piece of this puzzle, as far as these mega trends that are making traditional stormwater management techniques less effective, is that society has changed the goal on us. In the 50s, when Walnut Creek was built, there were no water quality regulations that talked about stormwater. All we cared about was getting the water away so that it wouldn't flood. And I can't blame them for that. That was the reality of the world as it was. This is my take on how the environmental movement happened. It's very, very brief, but I think it's fairly common knowledge that Rachel Carson's 1962 book on Silent Spring kind of catalyzed everybody's awareness that DDT was an endocrine disruptor that was affecting many different populations, people and animals, and it galvanized social support for an environmental movement. In 1969, the Cuyahoga River, which is near Cleveland, Ohio, caught on fire for the 13th time that decade. How does a river catch on fire? Rivers catch on fire when there's so much oil and film on the top of them that the train that you see on the left side of that photo, when it runs by and the metal wheels spark and the sparks leap into the river, it actually catches on fire. And in a moment in our history when we had environmental passion and damages like that just right in our face, there was enough cultural movement to create the EPA. Congress had to act. And so in 1970, the EPA was created. And 2 years later, they passed the Clean Water Act, which transformed what was previously all about keeping drinking water safe into a regulatory framework for caring about what they call non-point sources of pollution. Non-point sources are all the pollution that comes off the land when rain hits it and the water runs across it and picks up the various things along the way. It can be dog poop. You all have probably replaced tires or brakes in your life. You ever wonder where those go? And they're in a million pieces and they're all over the land. When you hear that you shouldn't drive fast when it's raining, especially in the first hour, that's because that's when all of those oils and other pollutants are at their most mobile and they're all around us. And that's what makes it really slippery out there. I also will say the internet has had a bit of an effect. I'm sure we all remember the WWW World Wide Web craze of the 90s. It helps people know more about their world. If you've bought a home recently on Zillow or Redfin, for example, they'll tell you if you live in a floodplain. That used to be secret information that maybe your realtor wouldn't tell you. There's plenty of community groups, Facebook, Reddit, etc., that help people understand when that pond down the street smells bad. And that changes the way that people care about their communities. And so we now expect more of our infrastructure. We expect it to not only get the water away, but also keep us happy in it in a way that wasn't the case when much of it was designed. In 2023, California started or led the way with 6 PPD regulations. I'm not going to say what that acronym means, but essentially it's the first effort to keep toxins from tires out of public waterways. And so that's just an example of some of the new ways we care, the quality of our environment, not just whether it's in our basement or not. As stormwater engineers, we tend to talk about these impacts in a few different ways. Flooding is pretty obvious. You've all seen it on the news. There's both nuisance and catastrophic flooding, but it costs us a lot of money as a community, as a nation. Sewer overflows, a result of infrastructure that combines both sanitary sources, so the stuff that comes from our toilets, with surface runoff, what comes from rain, and mixes into the same set of pipes, can cause basically a traffic jam at the wrong time when there's a lot of rain in that system, which results in the sewage system spilling either into the streets through manholes or into outfalls instead of going to a wastewater treatment plant as the Clean Water Act expected us to do. I mentioned water quality issues and how runoff picks up a lot of the pollution that's across the landscape. Studies have recently identified that has a pronounced effect on the water quality issues that we are measuring. And stream erosion. I know Rossmoor lost an oak tree recently and maybe some of a golf course because of rapid runoff moving through a creek. That kind of issue not only affects the people who live around the places where the streams erode, but downstream where the sediments collect and reduce the ability to protect those communities from flooding. So there's kind of a network of different effects that happen when stormwater is not managed. So what is this traditional stormwater infrastructure that I seem so bent on improving? This is a very simple diagram, so apologies to the engineers in the room, but I think it's important to think about it in the abstract to get the point across. I think of them like bathtubs. They have a single size and they have a single size drain. And how fast that water leaves is a function of how high the water is inside of it and how big that drain is, and whether there's anything downstream that's already backing it up. They look like many different things. You can call them wet ponds or dry ponds, depending on whether they hold water during dry weather. They can be wetlands, they can be green infrastructure like bioretention basins. They can also be other things like cisterns or subsurface detention structures like are put underneath parking lots or stadiums. All of these systems are designed to convey a certain amount of water for one of the objectives that matter to the community. And they're designed once. What are they designed for? I've been kind of hinting at a few problems, but when stormwater engineers think about what they want to do with their parcel, they tend to have one of these goals in mind as far as how they're going to change how water moves through the landscape. They know that if they slow water down, they can improve water quality by letting the particles settle to the bottom before they're discharged. They know that if they've got a big community that has combined sewer overflow or a flooding problem, maybe if they shift the timing of when all the peaks of water occur at the same place, that they can get more effective capacity out of that system. Obviously, if you have a lake in the middle of your golf course, you need it to look good so that people want to play golf there. Or if it's a wetland, it needs to be within a certain operating regime for whatever plants and animals live there. Erosion is a lot like water quality protection. Essentially, the faster the water moves, the more soil it picks up. And the more soil it picks up, the more you're eroding. So you want to slow water down. Flooding is the classic one. It's a very simple equation. Get the water away from here as fast as possible. And some places in the world, not so much in our country, but it's happening more and more. But I'll say places like Jordan, for example, have led the way at designing for long-term water reuse. They want to actually collect the rainwater and use it for some purpose. One thing that's important to note here is that these are not necessarily compatible goals. If you can only design a bathtub with one size drain, you're only going to get an optimal outcome or solution for one of these objectives. If you need to get it away for flooding, you're not going to keep it slow for erosion control. It's just a difficult problem to solve. On the left there, you'll see kind of an example of a culvert that on the other side of it would be some sort of depression, some storage that's designed to collect rainwater. And this is what I meant, the engineers that decided the shape and size of that culvert had one chance. They needed to get the main objective solved, and they needed to do as well as possible for all the other ones. But it wasn't optimal for at least more than one of those objectives. There are site constraints. We've talked about how land is sometimes limited to be available for use. Sometimes there's an inability to infiltrate because of sediment in the soil. And other reasons why maybe the traditional approach doesn't necessarily fit. One of the big pieces when we started this research that we heard from engineers in the space was that they didn't know how well their solutions actually did. These passive systems are not monitored on a storm-by-storm basis or even seasonally. And so that both means that communities don't know what their return on investment is for these infrastructures unless they get calls from the constituents saying the water's in my basement, then they know it wasn't working. But engineers don't have a way of getting that self-actualization of working on something that they know works well. And that stunts further growth in our industry, which contributes, I believe, to how we can effectively address these problems. And I think the biggest thing, the bottom bullet point, the one that always sticks out to me is it's not that the people in the past did it wrong. It's just that nobody can predict the future. And if you're only going to design something that gets built once and it takes an entire civil design construction project again to change it, you're probably going to get it wrong sometime. It's not really your fault. Even if you wanted to build it for 1,000 times bigger than you wanted to, who has the money for that? So this is a problem that almost is expectable, not something that is that surprising. I'll also note that without the information coming out of these systems, you're probably going to either overspend on your maintenance because you have to maintain them all the time because you want to make sure they work, or you underspend because, maybe you don't have the money and there's no reason to, nothing's saying that it needs to be done. So that also affects the overall performance of the traditional approach. So we looked at all of these things back in 2010, and we were inside one of the preeminent consulting firms in the country, Geosyntec Consultants, thinking about how we were going to build the next stormwater infrastructure for our clients. And it was frustrating. And we realized the intuition that we had, that we've now tried to apply here, is that timing, flow rate, and predictability is the opportunity, is the way forward. And you can imagine traffic with rush hour. You know, how many of you drive on the freeway when you know it's going to be rush hour? I certainly always avoid it. Because if you can predict the flow of traffic, you can have a smoother commute. What we came up with is a stack of technology that we called continuous monitoring and adaptive control, or CMAC. And what this does is it turns one of these passive structures into an actively controlled or adaptively controlled system. So very briefly, we add a valve or pump which can control when water stays and when it leaves. We add a level sensor to the storage, which tells us how much water we've got there. And we connect that through a control panel to a cloud running piece of software, which can take into account how other systems around the watershed are working, as well as the weather forecast, which gives it some ability to understand what the weather will be in the future, both whether it will rain and whether it's going to be dry, and provides visibility into how all of this is playing out to both engineers, consultants, and other community stakeholders so that they can understand what's happening and how well their system is performing. And with that combination, we're able to turn, and I'll explain this basically, we're able to turn this passive strategy, which if you think of this graph as showing how much water is in one of these ponds or cisterns or detention basins over time, as it goes through a stormwater event or a rainfall event, you can imagine that in dry weather, there's a certain amount of water, and when it starts raining, it starts collecting runoff, and it starts releasing that runoff while it's collecting it, and that once it gets to the point where it's in dry weather, you're going to continue to see the water drain out at whatever rate, whatever natural curve you would have based on the height of that water and the size of the orifice. With CMAC, what we're able to do is change this. We can see a storm coming. If we know that the storm is going to be bigger than the amount of volume that you have to put water in there, we can reduce that volume predictively, let it out ahead of time. During wet weather, we can either completely hold water back or let it out at a lower rate so that we don't actually go over the top of the system. And then after it stops raining in the post-event period, we're able to say, we know it's going to be dry, so we know it's safe to hold this water back. And in that process, we can allow natural occurrences to occur, settling, nutrient uptake from vegetation, which then, when we eventually get to the post-event drawdown period, which happens at a managed and predictable rate, we're actually discharging something cleaner. And that's essentially the intuition and the way at a very, there's more complicated examples of it, but that's the basis of what we're applying here. I like pictures. I really like this picture because this was taken in 2016 in Maryland. The state of Maryland is very interested in water quality protection, and they're very interested in testing everything before they actually do anything. And so they had us monitoring the quality of the water downstream, and we put a camera up so that we could look at it. And I think the camera really says the story best. Right after it rains, on the left side of that chart, on the left picture, right when the pond water level goes up, you can see that there's a lot of sediment in that water. And that sediment probably has pollution attached to it. That tends to be how it works. 24 hours later, though, if you've held that water still, all that sediment has moved to the bottom. And plants have started to use the nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, etc., that came from the dog poop and fertilizer in your community to clean it. And so if you can discharge it at that point in time, what happens downstream is much less polluting than what would have happened if you had been discharging the entire time.
Your system is holding the water back.
Exactly. So we control the valve, and we just tell the valve when to open and when to close, based on all these, sensor information and the weather forecast, essentially. And what you can get with that is you can actually get multiple benefits out of the same piece of infrastructure, because you can have different strategies for different sized events. And so with one system, instead of optimizing it for one, we can create storage just in time to protect for flooding. We can affect the timing of when different parts of the community drain so that there is no downstream choke point that causes that combined sewer overflow. We can increase residence time, as I mentioned, in order to improve water quality. By the way, that's not an idea that we came up with. If you've ever been to a wastewater treatment plant, the first thing they do is they hold water in these big tanks and they keep it as still as possible. It's called primary treatment. So we're just doing it in the upstream area. And, same exact idea. We can tell the community that's responsible for these assets whether they're working the way they used to. So if they need to do operations and maintenance to clean it out or what have you, that's possible. And we can choose, instead of releasing it at the end of the storm, we can just keep it held forever. So that if you want to irrigate your crops or your garden or your golf course, you can do that. And by the way, if you're controlling the timing of flows and you're able to control how fast water leaves, you can choose to make it as slow as possible every time, which ultimately serves the purpose of minimizing erosion. So here's some pictures. A typical installation has a number of components, the same things that I mentioned. In addition to the basic actuator that controls the valve and the valve itself, there's a solar panel on the left, which goes with some of our sites that are not on the grid. You can do on grid or off grid. There's not always easy trenching access to power supplies. And level sensors are mounted inside of stilling wells to keep them protected from the elements and to keep their readings predictable. And you also can see that sometimes the storage itself is subsurface. You see a parking lot being built there. So it fits in many different form factors, but it's all basically the same idea. It's no longer a bathtub with a single hole. Getting this right is important because we're trying to solve some important problems for communities. Ideas are cheap, but execution is hard. It's something I think we all probably know. And that's essentially why this has to be a company. I was very interested in the research in this a long time ago, but the opportunity to do it means you need to work with professional engineers and you need to have reasons why communities believe that it's going to work and that it will be supported long term. And so that's essentially why OptiRTC exists. And some of the pieces that go along with that, I won't read all of these. I think alarms are important because they can alert people to conditions that matter in this infrastructure, rather than having, a completely automated solution that nobody ever sees. We can know, well, if something's going south, the O&M teams can get alerted about it so they can be available to help. On the mechanical side, a really important detail that we get right that's important for safety is that we work with local civil engineers who are ultimately designing these infrastructures to know what a safe fail-safe position should be. A fail-safe position typically is either open or closed, depending on the type of infrastructure and its location in the watershed. But in the event that something goes wrong with all this mechanical stuff and computers that we have added here, we want it to be predictable. That's the most important thing. And it needs to be consistent with the expectations of whatever engineer signed on the line to make it happen. And in addition, we assist the local community partners with the downstream condition assessment so that they can feel like when they're actually designing and installing these systems, they're doing so with awareness of how it's going to work in the end, and it can be professionally responsible. So, I mean, that's really an important part of the formula for what we call the formula for community resilience. It's combining local expertise with technology that's been deployed for many different types of stormwater systems in order to improve how resilient communities are to extreme events and every event that occurs. Very briefly, if you look at how this plays out over time when you're doing a CMAC installation, this looks very similar to a traditional design build process that you would see in civil engineering. But the interesting part for me is that there are arrows coming out of the operation and maintenance and flowing back into both planning and design and optimization, because there's information coming out of these systems about how well it's working, and frankly, how much water is even coming into them every time it rains. Sometimes things don't work the way that the engineers planned. Actually, a lot of times things don't work the way that engineers plan. And it's important for community investment to be properly calibrated to the biggest problems that they face. And this visibility that comes out of improving how each individual parcel works can inform long-term planning efforts so that watersheds can be made more effective over time and time isn't wasted as we get better at the solution. It goes, I'm not going to belabor this. We win a lot of awards for this, or our customers, excuse me, win a lot of awards for this because they are taking the step forward towards designing for an uncertain future, not just solving the problems of the day. And because they have information that proves it, which always helps with people who are looking to provide recommendations. I'm going to go briefly through this piece as well, because I want to get to the case studies here. In the stormwater design space, regulatory approval is an important component of being considered an adoptable solution. And we've worked really hard with a number of the communities that are leaders in stormwater management to establish ourselves as a trustworthy and viable solution. So in Chesapeake Bay, we've been approved for both dry and wet pond conversions, as well as increasing the volume for flood protection and the retention time for water quality. In Washington State, where erosion is a major concern and it rains almost all the time, we've been working with them for a number of years and Lainey will give you a deeper dive on that in a moment, to help them optimize how fisheries that they really care about are protected from the increasing urbanization that they face. The state of Maryland, I mentioned earlier, when it comes to water quality permitting and water quality approaches. And Virginia as well has gone ahead and sanctioned our solution as suitable for purpose for taking facilities that once were only static and handling dry weather and now can be used to hold water back for various alternative objectives. All right. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to turn this over to Lainey to give you a rundown of one of the most recent exciting case studies that came out.
So what's
Take it away. Good question. It's called a best management practice, and that is such an industry term. It's unbelievable, right? It's like, who doesn't have a best management practice in their job? But in stormwater, it means any facility, any piece of infrastructure that is designed to convey and manage stormwater runoff. So thank you for that question. I'm sorry, I tried to define my term. No, maybe.
Makes sense. Yeah, BMP also, if you've heard green infrastructure or GI, LID, a lot of people use interchangeable terms for those things. So that was a lot of information. How's everyone feeling? Ready to hear about some real life applications? Great. How are we doing on time? Alex, you'll tell me if I should speed up.
I think you're okay.
Okay. 2 minutes. All right, let's go. So I want to talk to you guys about a recent project that we've been working on in the Bear Creek watershed, which is in Washington. It's near Seattle, just to the east. And if you zoom in there, we're working on a sub watershed of a larger watershed that goes eventually to Lake Washington. And that's called the Bear Creek watershed. It includes both King County unincorporated areas as well as City of Richmond jurisdiction area. So one of the most interesting things about this one is that those two jurisdictions really had to work together. And they had to both work together with us for their solution. So what's going on in the Bear Creek watershed? That's what King County and City of Redmond wanted to know. So they did a study in 2018. And some of the things that they looked at were, what's the land use like? How are we growing? What's the population like? What's going on in the river? What's the pollution like? And what they were seeing was, the housing density is going up. They're building more. And that means that also the pollution to the river and the amount of runoff going to the river was increasing. The summer flows, though, the ones that in drier times were decreasing, and the temperatures during those times were increasing, which is really bad for the salmon, which is super important to the community in this area. Infiltration was also decreasing, which means there's just more water going down, which causes all of those problems that Alex mentioned. One of the other things that they looked at here was what their infrastructure is like. So in the pie chart, you can see that over 50% of their stormwater infrastructure was built before 1990. Before 1990, there weren't a lot of regulations on how you build stormwater infrastructure in this area at all. And they also didn't know a lot about how the climate could possibly be changing. So a lot of the infrastructure they have, they don't know a lot about, or it was designed maybe not for the correct things. So they're looking into, what do we do about this problem? What do we do here? And they looked into some solutions. In the pie chart on the right, you can see the cost of the solutions they looked into. Most of them were for new stormwater infrastructure, and that's over $50 million. That's a lot for just one small subwatershed of a larger area. And what they looked at here was just traditional detention ponds and stormwater ponds that are passive. And that's what costs this much money. So King County and Redmond were both really looking at, how can we retrofit some of our existing systems or do something else besides build a bunch of new stuff for $50 million to also get the same benefits. So they looked at a bunch of different things that they could possibly do. One of the things, like I said, they looked into building new infrastructure, so new ponds. Problem with that is that takes up space, it takes up land. And land is not only hard to come by, especially in an area like this. I don't know if you can tell from the map, but it's quite built out, lots of homes, very residential area. So there's not a lot of space, but also the space, the land costs a lot of money. It's expensive. It's probably the most expensive thing in that $50 million that this community was looking at purchasing for these new projects. So they were thinking, maybe let's not do that. They looked into LID, or low impact development. You can also hear BMP. And these are more about slowing and infiltrating water into the ground. The problem here in this area particularly is that the soils just don't want to let water through. They're just not having it. And in areas, a lot of areas in California are like this too. They have really like thick clay soils that just don't want water to go through. So they looked into, could we do deep well infiltration? Could we dig through all that clay and try to get it somewhere else? And the answer again was no. There's kind of a shallow outwash happening. So there wasn't really like a deep groundwater basin that you could infiltrate to, like there is in other places like the Central Valley or areas where you can really store more water underground. So that was also a no. They are also looking at some wetland enhancements, and those are really good for water quality treatment and slowing down the water. They have some of those, and in some locations, those are awesome, but that's not going to solve all of their problems. So the other thing that they were looking into is, how can we retrofit existing ponds with CMAC? So that's what we worked on with them, and we did a pilot project that we're hoping to keep expanding. So why did they end up choosing CMAC? Why did they decide to work on this project with us? Like I mentioned, it limits the land disturbance significantly. So in the figure, you can see the blue pond areas are their existing ponds, and the red over it is showing how much they would have to build and how much space they would have to take in order to get the benefits that they need to get. And you can see some of that is going into nearby houses, it's over roads. There's just not enough space for what they would need to do with traditional passive infrastructure. So Another reason was the traditional passive infrastructure is about $1 million per pond. That's no small amount of money. But with CMAC implementing the hardware and software that we provide in this system, it's more along the lines of $102,000 for the capital costs. So just avoiding spending those millions for each pond can be really helpful to get the same benefits. And then another one that they were super interested in, which is really working out well, is collecting the data and being able to use that data to make decisions on the system. So they have a lot of things they're looking into in this area. They're really concerned about, like I said, the salmon, the trout, and like the biology that's going on in the river, which has to do with temperatures and the amount of water and the quality of water and all those things. And they're doing studies right now to figure out how are the systems that we're putting in place working? Because like Alex mentioned, a lot of these things that engineers design and build, we're not quite sure if they're working like we wanted them to. Speaking as a civil engineer who tried to design these systems for a long time, I never really was sure that what was put in was exactly what we wanted it to do, right? So in this case, they're able to see the data and use it in other studies to say, hey, we're not really seeing the water quality benefits we wanted. What else can we do to help? So that's why they decided to go with us. And I'll show you how it worked. So the partnership was really important here between the city of Redmond and the county because they both own land within the watershed to the tributaries that go to the river of concern. We worked together with them to do some feasibility studies on how the CMAC could work and what benefits it could give them. In the figure, you can see that there are red spaces. Those spaces are basically the areas that are managed by infrastructure that was built before stormwater management was really top of mind for the design criteria. So those are the areas that we're concerned about. Hopefully you can see the gray hatch on top of that, and that is the areas that are now controlled by the CMAC retrofits. So we're able to control a large portion of that area that they were concerned about without doing big infrastructure projects, without replacing pipes or digging things up, just by adding, a valve, the solar panel, those small things to the area. Like I said, they want to monitor these things for other reasons. They're doing a study right now to see the trends in the overall watershed. And this is going to be a really important study to show how these systems can work and help inform what they're going to do in the rest of the watershed. So I'll show you some pictures of what they look like. This is one of them. You can see where the blue valve is at the bottom and it goes up the stem to the actuator, and that's how it opens and closes. And that's just at the outlet point where that wing wall is. Here they tried to put it both in a manhole and outside, and that one ended up working better in that case. This is one called Crown Heights. It's kind of in a more open suburban area. They had a bit of space. They have a solar panel, and they let that area behind in the picture fill up with water when it's raining. This is a rare sunny day we caught in Seattle. This is another example of one of the ponds, which is right nearby, but it is within a more densely urban area. So there's housing right next to it here. And those are houses that we maybe would have had to knock down for a new pond, but we didn't have to because of CMAC. So how is this working? We built it a couple years ago. It's been working for a while now, and we've looked at the results to see how it's going. And these figures show the King County ponds, and which are the ones on the top that were previously dry ponds, so they don't usually keep water in them when it's not raining. And then the ones below are the ones in Redmond that are usually wet ponds. They do keep a little bit of like a dead pool, if you've heard that term for reservoirs. So this is about 60 events that were measured, and it shows the peak flows on the y-axis. And it shows in the blue, the passive peak flow, which is modeled what would have gone through if we didn't have the retrofit. And in the orange to the right of that is what the measured peak flow was actually in the system. So you can tell that it's much lower, which is a good thing. We want lower peak flows to help with erosion and all those kind of things, flooding. So especially on the dry ponds, we saw a huge decrease in those peak flows because usually they they wouldn't be able to have any extra space to fill up before a storm happened, and now we're able to do that. So this one is a little complicated, so please bear with me and ask me if you have questions. But what we have here is flow duration curves, and we have the percent time exceeding on the x-axis and the flows on the y-axis. So what's plotted here are the flows that are critical erosive flows. So these are the flows that can cause erosion and downstream issues. So they're the ones that we're really interested in. So when you build something and you're going to disrupt the natural flow of water, you're going to put up a house, parking lot, whatever, you're going to change from that blue line, which is pre-developed, you're going to change what naturally used to happen, and it's going to change to the orange line, which is developed and unmitigated, so no pond at all. So what you're trying to do is get from the orange line to the blue line. You're trying to get back to what it was like before we built anything at all. And that's the best thing for the environment. So when you build a passive system, when you build a pond, that's definitely a good thing. It helps you out a little bit, but it doesn't quite get you there. When you build, when you retrofit that pond with CMAC, you're able to really decrease the amount of times those erosive flows are exceeding in that amount of time. And you're able to more closely match what that pre-developed curve looked like, which is really important and basically what all of the stormwater regulations are trying to go towards. The black line is very interesting. It is the actual observed flows from one of our ponds in this area from February of 2023 to November 2024. So good chunk of time there, not quite a year, but so it's not quite comparable to the other lines because those are based on a 40-year continuous simulation, and statistics based on that amount of time is different than just something that was observed. But basically, what we were seeing is that what we're actually observing is much lower, even lower than the pre-developed. And this is really awesome news. It seems like our system is outperforming what we even thought it might based on the modeling, but we'll have to keep monitoring to know for sure.
So do we know that it's gonna have less flow under those conditions?
Yeah, so I mean, that's not always the case, right? Every customer, every client is looking at something different and has different requirements. So if you have a certain amount of flow that you know is important for the salmon, for example, and you want that base flow to exist, you can just set the amount that the valve is open to that flow. And that flow will basically consistently always be running through the creek. And in a situation where we don't have the ability to control that, there might be more dry periods, there might be periods where there's much more flow, there might be erosion happening. But when you're able to control that, you're able to make sure that you have exactly what the ecology of the creek needs, and then you control the rest of it, basically.
Yeah, I guess I was sort of asking a sort of meta level question. Is Mother Nature always right?
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I don't question my own mother, so.
Now, I disagree with that.
You can tell her.
The period, the February 23rd to February 24th, was that a below average, average, or above average kind of rainfall?
I think it was pretty average. And like I said, it's not representative of a whole 40-year, right? In 40 years, you'll have much larger events that will cause things to be a little bit different. Yeah, they'll vary a little bit. So that's why, you know, taking it with a grain of salt here, but it is really good news that what we're seeing in the actual observed data looks to be trending in the right direction.
So your model and for business very steep upward. What is that supposed to, what is that represent?
They're basically, there's only probably like a few data points in that area, and they're having about the same exceedance per flow.
Where does recycling water fit into?
I love that question. So Alex said that maybe people aren't recycling water. I disagree. Here in California, that's becoming a really important thing. And I think that, you know, California, Arizona, Nevada, all these areas, they're not really concerned as much with stormwater and water quality. They are, but what's on everyone's mind is there's not enough water for people to drink. There's just not enough water here. We have so many people in places that never really had much water to begin with. And what are we going to do about that? So one of the things that is really interesting, and we do have a couple projects in California, one in LA, where we are capturing and reusing that stormwater for infiltration back into the groundwater, which is awesome, as well as reusing for irrigation on there. It's a park, basically. So reuse is really important. It's always a good idea to have more sources of water supply than less, so that you can have more resilience. So if you can add even a little bit more to your water supply by reusing some stormwater that otherwise would have gone downstream somewhere else, then that can be really beneficial to communities.
Down the hillside and under the hillside to our street. And it's, to my observation, it's very clear, fresh water. And it goes down the gutter to the sewer drain. And I think you have similar situations all the way around the valley where you could somehow capture that water before it goes into the sewer and use it for the golf course or whatever. It's just a matter of where to store it, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems like we're a natural area where something like this could work.
Yeah, I mean, this area, you guys are in, you know, a subwatershed. You're in this canyon that leads to Tice Creek, right? So a lot of water is flowing through this community and going to that creek. So you're right about that.
Is that right that any runoff, even here in Rossmoor, goes into the sanitary sewer? I think Central Sam, our sewer provider, would vehemently disagree with that. Maybe 100 years.
It
doesn't go into the treated sewer rights. That goes to the runoff and ends up in the creek. All the rainwater. It's illegal to put in this.
So a lot of cities in the Bay Area. I'm sorry.
We have another question, sorry. Yeah, I don't think that it's combined storm and sewer in Walnut Creek, but like San Francisco has combined sewers, so that's true there. Yes.
I'm gonna bring up Tice Creek. Tice Creek. Jaggers, stars, storage, creek, goes one catchment day. Including being able to bring back native plants, animals. With changes, use the erosion that's happening. Is there some way to make your system could be?
Yeah, I mean, if there are areas that are suitable or you already have, like we talked about, some kind of storage or detention pond, that there's a lot of upstream runoff that eventually does get into the creek, we would be able to help capture and slow that flow, and for whatever base flows you would like for those plants you want to have, and to slow down and capture more during a larger event to help slow that erosion. So I think that it's a possibility. I don't have the design plans on me now. Yeah.
Encourage the communities that you work with to plant big trees because they absorb much more water and retain it.
Yeah, like a tree well, like a planting tree well. That's like one of those BMPs. That's definitely one of them. It's not something that our technology would go on to. But yes, those are encouraged by stormwater communities for sure. Yes.
Are you familiar with this huge Drop Creek facility that basically goes from where our gate is down to where Savers is? And we had to put a couple $1 million in that since the 8 years I've been here. But there's a passive gate right down there by Savers. And there was a satellite telemetry from there. I think it's a USGS or somebody. And I think
Okay.
it's now just a little cell phone thing. They've converted it to where it's not satellite based, but what do they do with that information? And that's within walking distance of us right here. I believe the
Yeah.
controls are all passive.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was put in for. It could be monitoring the stream flows for a particular reason. I would have to look into that.
Yeah, great.
Catch this.
So it is a basin detaining water then. So it probably is passive though, where it has, and then there's like a little weir, like a spillway where the water goes over if it fills up. Yeah, so something like that could be retrofitted with the CMAC technology, and you could get more information on that, and you could learn how to control it better if you thought that it wasn't performing like you would like it to.
Have any opinions on the city of Walnut Creek? There's tremendous passive. I mean, underneath Broadway Plaza and where the creeks all come together are massive. Apparently back in the 60s and stuff, there was severe flooding here regularly.
Yeah, I mean, Walnut Creek and lots of other places. I went to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and their downtown, just like Walnut Creek's, is just built smack on top of the creek, because when you're building communities, you wanted to be near the water. You wanted to use the water for things. And then you build over it, cover it up, and then maybe it's not big enough and flooding can happen. So that's a common problem. I don't know specifically about Walnut Creek, but in my personal opinion, I'd love to work more with Walnut Creek and put in some of our systems. So, yeah.
So, there's like ponds and there's also retention ponds and flooding.
There's only one pond.
There's only one, okay. I don't know.
That's for pumping rather retention.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it'd be practical for retention ponds above the valley. There aren't any. And I think our problems are the way the bridges were built. I didn't anticipate the ferocity of the erosion. That's the problem. They're gonna fall down.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things you can do for stream erosion, doing stream restoration kind of projects where you just slow the flow using riprap and rocks, and you can have things like stilling pools where you kind of settle and have smaller little pools. Those are more small scale things that you can do to help with erosion issues that wouldn't be a fit for the CMAC technology though. Great questions. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, a lot of my previous job actually was looking at different water reuse systems, including black water, gray water, and rainwater. So looking at the differences between them and how you would use one of them. So gray water is water that doesn't have a lot of organic materials. So it doesn't have kitchen sinks, it doesn't have toilets, but it does have things like washing machines, showers, and other sinks that the water's pretty clean. And you don't have to do a ton of treatment for them. So it can be cheaper than capturing all the water and doing kind of like a mini wastewater treatment plant. And a lot of places in California do that. It depends on what the regulations are though, if you're allowed to. So like in San Diego, they have a program where you can just directly put in your own system where you capture from your washing machines and you do a subsurface strip to your backyard. Can water all your plants and your trees. And they have, rebates they give their community members for doing those things. So those things are definitely becoming more popular. And for a place like this, where you do have a lot of people and a lot of water demands and water loads for both gray water and wastewater, building a system like that might be cost effective other than just doing it like on a one single family home. So it could be a potential opportunity. I can connect you with my old coworkers for that.
Back when we were in a drought, Rossmoor, Golden Rain, had plans together to put in a satellite treatment plant. Okay.
Oh.
In other words, to intercept all the sewers, the bad stuff.
Mhm.
Or went to Central Sand.
Mhm.
And then it was a reverse osmosis. It was about a $25 million project. Remember the people on Cactus Court were up in arms because the sludge had to be brought out of there and all. So we've looked at that, but the major benefactor of that was the golf course. Because otherwise, we're going to stop watering the golf. So if we truly run out of creek and we can't buy East Bay mud water anymore.
Mhm.
But that all just, and I'd heard there was a big meeting over at the Veterans Place in Lafayette that was hosted by Central Sand and East Bay Mud. And what came out of that is about every 25 years, they get real serious about some pipelines, even Martinez back up this way, really expensive. But then it started raining.
You can't forget.
Why, I mean, this is the thing that always bugs me, is why in the world do we use drinking water to flush our toilet? Cause that's what we do. I mean, it's so obvious to me, it's like, if we could just separate out laundry and shower water and use it to flush our toilets. Imagine how much water you're saying. I mean, it's just nothing else, just that simple sort of concept of gray water. I just like, take this wonderful water that we could drink and use it to flush our toilets. And I
Wait, you know, until the last couple of years, they were using potable water for air conditioners. And Second Mutual, we just got rid of all this. Okay, so.
Yeah, air
the answer
conditioning,
is
cooling
facility
systems use a lot.
Right, kind of like gasoline.
yeah.
Yeah, as the price of water keeps going up, it's another thing that I studied a lot at my last job, but as price of water keeps going up, especially in a place like California, spending the extra money to put in the extra pipes you need or the extra treatment you need for a gray water reuse or black water reuse is going to start to be worth it if you're going to be spending $7, $8, $9 per cubic foot of water that you're purchasing that you're going to use. So I think that kind of thing is going to become a lot more common. And yeah, it is. I think it's a no-brainer, but I'm in the industry and maybe you're an elevated thinker too. I think that there's a lot of folks who are still really put off by the ick factor of
Well, we also
it.
pay for water, we don't pay for sewage.
Oh, you don't pay for sewage?
Well, I mean, you don't have a separate charge.
It's in your county tax.
Charge.
It's in the taxing scheme.
Right.
Yeah, Georgia, you pay for that water.
It's separate.
Central Sand is funded by property tax.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't see it. You don't see it as a separate charge.
Well, there's charges now for stormwater too in a lot of places. That's becoming a new thing in San Francisco. As of last year, parcels are now charged for the amount of impervious area they have. That equates to what the stormwater discharge is to the system because the city is having a lot of issues with sewer overflows because the stormwater is going into the sewer pipes also. So when there's a storm and that water overflows, it's not just stormwater that is already kind of gross, it's also sewage water. And that is a big public perception problem, it's a big public health risk. And so they're trying to figure out how do we also hold people accountable and charge them for this utility? We talked about funding for stormwater projects is really difficult to come by, which is why a lot of our infrastructure is so old and not working correctly. And that's because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And you're charged for your water and your wastewater, and those fees go towards improving those systems. So now a lot of utilities are doing the same thing with stormwater, which you can like or not like about that.
Maybe we could let Lainey finish the presentation and then take questions if there's time after.
Yeah, this was the end. I just wanted to say to wrap up the case study that we're still working with this community and we're working towards still monitoring the systems they have, optimizing them for their goals and looking to put in more of these basins and connect them into more of a smart watershed network where they all talk to each other and really optimize the whole watershed itself. So it's exciting. Thanks.
If we're out of time, we don't have to keep going. There are a couple more case studies, but you let us know. We want to be useful here.
Well, do you want more case studies or do you have more questions?
Case study.
Oh, why are we
doing both.
How many case studies do you have?
There's two, but we can be very quick. One thing I wanted to add just to that last conversation, there's something called Western Water Law, which means abbreviated first in line, first in right. And oftentimes those legal precedents are a big reason why gray water and water reuse projects don't work west of the Rockies. I believe Mark Twain, when he was living in San Francisco, said beer is for drinking and water is for fighting over. And it's actually a very real thing. In Colorado, for example, you're not allowed to capture more than the amount of water that would have been captured by the plant life and soil media within the first foot of your soil in the pre-developed condition if you're going to be doing rainwater harvesting. So for example, that is one limiting factor that just the legal framework we exist in is also against us sometimes. So that's another reason why some of these great ideas don't get brought to bear. We have worked on a feature that only captures that amount of water, which we've applied in Colorado. Yeah, there are many reasons. But thank you. That was a really interesting conversation. I was trying to hold back the whole time. I'll be very brief here. This is a golf course that has both a flooding and a water quality, as well as a combined sewer concern in Philadelphia, near Philadelphia. And I'll skip this slide. Basic picture here is that it's a much more cost-effective approach to manage that a big pond in that golf course than it is to build more of them. And there's some interesting data here for a 2.1-inch event that occurred right before they started turning on our system to manage the flows. They actually saw an overflow, this is a chart from one of our web dashboards. And you can see what that looks like when it's happening. Nobody was playing golf that day or for a little while, which is not a great thing. But since that time, after turning it on, what's highlighted here is that the system continuously is looking at what's happening and predictively drawing down the pond that otherwise is used for, being a nice pond at a golf course and recreational purposes. So they're able to kind of take that benefit and make it work. So that's continued. 5 years later, we've had a lot of success at managing multiple flows. Albany, New York is another community that's really dense and has been a big adopter of the CMAC approach. What they've done that's particularly interesting is they've really understood the opportunities upstream. So the questions about where does this fit into kind of what we're doing in Tice Valley or around Walnut Creek, you can think about this as an opportunity to operate at the most upstream intervention point that you can in order to affect what's downstream. And this strategy is what Albany has been able to deploy to manage what is previously a combined sewer system that was, when they got their consent decree from the EPA, I believe it was 543 million gallons of raw sewage being discharged into the Hudson River every year that they needed to protect against. So they've made a significant amount of progress by installing CMAC solutions in the upper reaches. I believe this is at the Beaver Creek subwatershed here.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have the dam, water, tourism. Then let it out according to your information.
Essentially, that's what the valve or gate or pump is doing, is it's holding back the water upstream and giving even the unmanaged parts of the watershed their chance to drain, while parts that are managed hold back and wait. And so, you affect the timing, just like they put traffic lights on the on-ramps. Thank you all for your attention. Go through that quickly, but it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Alex and Lainey, for a really fascinating presentation. It seemed to spark a lot of good conversations, and I'm sure we'll all be thinking about it. We'll move on to the rest of our meeting. Oh, you got to get us out of those slides and into ours.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I know. What would we do without him?
Yeah, be fine. Yeah, I know. Should be able to.
Okay, so we'll start committee reports, and I've got the one for the legislative committee. We're going to have our first meeting of the new legislative session tomorrow at 1:30 upstairs at Dollar Clubhouse. You just sort of have to find us. We don't have a reserved room. We're going to review any new bills that have been introduced so far in the legislature that we want to bring forward to the steering committee for endorsement. I don't suppose there are too many yet. The session just started, but we'll have a few things to talk about. And even if you don't necessarily think you want to join our committee, you're welcome to attend just to see how we operate and, you know, see if it might be something that you'd like to be involved with. Basically, we find bills that we think are good for the environment, or in some cases, things that we don't think are good and we want to oppose, and we do a little summary of them, present it to the steering committee, and if they endorse, then we send letters to the committees and to the members and let them know what our position is. It's pretty fascinating. You get to follow the whole bill all the way through the process, see how the legislative process works, and even if your bill ends up not being signed into law, you learn a lot about how laws are made. So if you're interested, let me know. I'd love to tell you more about it. And if you think you'd like to join, I can train you in how the process works. Okay, next up, Carol.
You've seen this slide before, but it's been updated. There's been some interesting developments with the legal this lawsuit that's being brought by Sunflower Alliance against CalGEM. That's the agency that manages oil drilling in California. And several parties have become aware that the impact or the verdict on this it's been accepted at it's been a process been going on for several years at various levels of the court. It's finally gotten to the California Supreme Court. They agreed to hear it. This month was when they were going to make their opening statements, but they decided to have an extension so it won't progress quite as quickly because it's expanded. A lot of parties have realized that the verdict will impact injecting anything in wells that are unused. So the original lawsuit has to do with a permit that was issued by CalGEM to a driller, an out-of-state driller, to inject water that came up when they pulled some oil out of one place, and they're taking the water with other things in it, but they're calling it water, to inject it in Brentwood in some of the abandoned wells that aren't going to be examined. No one's used them. They don't know where the water will go, the water and the toxins will go when they put it in there. So that was all done without an environmental impact report. And that's the basis for the lawsuit. So they realize, when I say they, several other jurisdictions realize that it's not just water that are, there's over 20,000 abandoned oil wells in California. And a lot of them are in Contra Costa County. And people don't want them injecting companies have been already just injecting anything they want to into these wells. So whether that's going to be now in the future requiring an environmental impact report is part of the process. As this is expanded and become more publicized, Chevron attorneys decided to get into that. So they're also opposing any need for CEQA because they want to do what they want to with their wastewater. So that's what's happening there. And a couple of us in the club put up a total of $750 as matching funds. And we already have nearly $500 collected from various funds that various of you have donated. And I thank you for that. If you still want to donate at any point, like with your tax refund, if you get one in a month or two, then consider putting part of it to this. You just go to the Sunflower Alliance website. It's Sunflower-Alliance, and it explains it there. You can donate there, and then you send an email to me saying how much you sent, and we'll send in the matching funds to match what you just donated. So that's what that's about. Any questions? Okay. It's in Brentwood where they're the initial wells that they're talking about using. And where the water, somebody asked me last night, well, what are they doing with the water now? It's going to an undisclosed location in trucks. That's all they've been able to find. And they tried to get some volunteers to follow the trucks to see where they go. They suspect they may go all the way to Southern California, but they're not sure. So they're probably, I said, well, how do you know where they're not just dumping it in the Delta? She says, oh, I don't think they do that. I'm not so right. Yes.
What it would cost to have some of that water tested.
Yeah. Exactly. That's part of what the environmental impact report. You test what you're putting down in there and it has to meet certain criteria before you allow, because a lot of wastewater from drilling operations has all sorts of toxins in it. So, because they pulled it up from way down below, it's even radioactive sometimes. So anyway, next slide.
Yeah, the next slide is you too.
Okay. Continuing the theme of water is really interesting. Just so you know, a month from now, on our first Tuesday night meeting, I said like this, same place, same time, is going to be the East Bay Mud Municipal Utility District Director, Luz Gomez. So that's continuing the water theme. And so you can save some questions in the meantime. And we have this film coming tomorrow to Peacock, and we highly recommend it. If you can't, takes me a while to orient myself to this, but the dark blue and black blob on the left side of that is the United States. And the little blue thing that hangs down is Florida. So if that orients you, then the red is the water surrounding Florida. And as it goes up along the coast of the East Coast, that's the Gulf Stream. And it gets gradually a little bit cooler. And the film does a great job of explaining this because I knew nothing about the Gulf Stream. I've never lived in that part of the world. And so anyway, even those of you who have, I hope you will come and educate us when questions get asked, but it has an incredible effect. I learned that a year and a half ago in Florida, the water was so hot, it was up to 93 degrees in parts of the Atlantic Ocean near Florida. And there were at least 11 days where would have been dangerous to get in the water to swim. So they were restricted. So that's how hot, that's what climate change is doing to places that were already hot. They're getting way hotter. Beg your pardon? Yes, yeah, exactly. Hot water all over. But the interesting thing about the Gulf Stream is it has all sorts of beneficial effects. It brings warm water and warms up these land masses that would be covered with ice otherwise, and goes all the way over to Europe. So come to the film and you'll learn more about that. Oh, and next month we have another water film. It's called Bad River, and I'm not going to tell you about that until next time.
This is also a good time to thank Carol for bringing tonight's vegan snacks. We're delicious. We're trying to get more people to bring snacks, so it's not all just the same thing all the time. So if you're interested in providing snacks for one of the meetings coming up this year, talk to Dave Casey in the back and he'll put you on the schedule. Okay, Bruce, tree planting and preservation. Oh, come on up, come on up. Where's our cloud? Nah, it's better up here.
Well, by popular demand, just meant to come up here. Hi, everybody. I'm one of the co-chairs of the tree planting and preservation. Leila will get the final word if she wants to add. Jerry McNair. We have been doing a lot of successful projects, and one of them is the Acorn Planting Project that we did 5 years ago, and we're doing it again. And we gathered over 1,300 acorns. We built cages to protect them. And this Thursday, we're doing a demo meeting to show people how to plant the acorns properly and install the cages to protect the new growth. Interested in that, could talk to me, because there are still opportunities to do planting. Even if you don't have acorns, we have extras. We've been working to support the landscape committees. They have a challenging job to do, a lot to do. A lot of good members of the committees are not professionals. If you are, we're struggling.
And we're trying to get them information to help them establish best practices at the committee level so they can be more effective in serving the communities. Leela has been giving really fabulous tree tours, and we'll continue that. Do an Earth Day table, and we're enhancing our website to share more information with all of you and mutuals. And we occasionally write articles for the Rossmoor News. We're gonna have a meeting. And we meet the fourth Tuesday, what is it, 28th, Lou? So 28th, and that'll be in our newsletter, when and where. And we're gonna kind of look at, we're gonna reevaluate what we're doing at the next meeting. It's the beginning of the year. It's a good time to kind of reassess. We have 3 co-chairs who are very pressed for time. So looking at whether we need to perhaps get more people involved, some are willing to step up and take on some of the responsibilities, or maybe cut back on what we try to do. Do you want to add to that, Leela, and then I'll call on you.
Just one thing about the tree tour. I did a fall tree tour on November 13th, much colder than it is now. And about 50 people came, and I had sent an invitation to the Nature Walkers group, and then I had to send it to their board to get approval to send it out to their group. But I think a lot of the people who did come were from Nature Walkers. I'll share one fact that I didn't know, that red maple trees are gender fluid, which I had no idea. I know fishes are, you know, there are various species of fish that change like. But I didn't know that about the red maple tree that could go between. So male trees can have female flowers, and female trees can have male flowers, depending on what stresses in the environment. And I also found a black oak that, you know, we often talk about valley oaks and coast live oaks, but not, and blue oaks, but not the black oak.
Yeah, I've seen. My question was, what oaks are you finding?
The ones that are here, so Blue Oak, Valley Oak, and Lime.
I see, I've been black oak a lot.
Yeah, the black oaks I've seen, as you come into Rossmoor on the right-hand side,
Well, I've seen them walking through the trail.
and well, further in, but it's close up in the road. Then one up the sportsman's park, people didn't know it existed up there. But they didn't collect them this year because we didn't know, you know, we get them able from the tree. And they're just on the content that Bruce mentioned. We're trying to, we have a small group working on the content. We've often, by the landscape committee, they said we don't know anything about trees. They're all in the landscape committee. And so we thought we would like to come up with a guide that gives basic information about trees, but also include best tree care practices that can really educate them, because one of our goals of educational tree planting and preservation committee. So we're working on that right now, but we hope to have a guide that they can have as a reference when, and then put the content on our website.
Addressing the video about the urban forestry project in Walnut Creek. And Leela's going to talk about ginkgos, which are very interesting trees, and some particular ginkgos that she's going to talk about. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
And I don't think we have any other slides from any other committees. So this is the part where we thank you for coming. And as Carol mentioned, our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 4th at 7 p.m. It will be next door in the club room, though, not here in the Fairway room. And our featured speaker will be East Bay Mud Board member Luz Gomez. So don't miss that. Thanks for coming. Thanks to our speakers. I,